And now I'm going to recognize Mr. Danielyan to begin his testimony, and want to remind all the witnesses that we're here for an abbreviated time period, and so if you want to, make your remarks brief so everyone can have a chance to go and we can have question and answers, that would be great. Thank you very much, Mr. Danielyan.
Thank you, Mr. Vesey, and thank you, Helsinki Commission members. Let me start with thanking honorable members of this distinguished commission for organizing these hearings and bringing Armenia's democratic transformation under the spotlight. Your interest towards democratic developments in Armenia is very encouraging, and it's also, the support is very much appreciated. I should say that as a member of a Parliamentary Assembly of Organization for Security and Cooperation of Europe, we established good level working relations with US delegation and its distinguished members. At the same time, I should bring your attention to the fact that there is much yet to be done in deepening our cooperation across all three dimensions of OSCE. I believe this hearing will contribute to that aim, especially in the direction of human rights and democracy. I also believe that Armenia's recent experience with peaceful democratic transformation has much to offer for many countries in the region and across the globe, and this experience and commitment to democratic values and human rights was also recognized only a few days ago when Armenia was elected by the vote of more than 140 UN member states to be member of Human Rights Councils of United Nations. Now, coming to the process of democratic transformation of Armenia, there are many aspects I would like to present. While I was making my close to 30-hour long trip to stand in front of you to make this 5-minute testimony, I was thinking what are the best ways to present the process that is happening in Armenia. And I came to a conclusion that maybe instead of presenting the details of democratic reforms and strategies and all the documents that I suspect are being and can be communicated in a better form, I will talk a little bit about my personal experience and journey, which is directly intertwined with the changes that are happening in Armenia, and present you few episodes from the past 10 or so years. So first, let me begin with the February 2008 contested presidential elections that were happening in Armenia. I'm early in my career working for a known organization in the United States, that is IFES, International Foundation for Electoral System. And through this organization, we are supporting democratic elections in Armenia, as well as witnessing the systemic level of rigged elections. I cannot forget the efforts of a brave American woman whose name is Linda Edgeworth, who was trying to save one of the local observers that was being harassed in the local precinct. The number of precincts in Armenia are close to 2,000, and unfortunately there were not enough Lindas to assist stopping this systemic level of vote rigging. After these elections, for 10 days, citizens of Armenians protested peacefully on the streets of Armenia. And this was resulted in one of the darkest days of modern Armenian history, March 1st, 2008, when because of use of fatal force, 10 people were killed on the streets. Only a few months later, I remember our conversations with my friend and colleague Arsen Kharatian happening in DC, summer 2008, about the democratic prospects of Armenia, and those were not very hopeful conversations. And the prospects were not very bright. Despite that, I returned to Armenia, and with the hope of contributing to democratic development of Armenia, and one of the best and secure ways to do it was joining USAID efforts. I should say that most of my career I spent working with different USAID projects aimed at working in democracy and governance sector in Armenia and aimed at strengthening democratic institutions in Armenia. I remember 2012 when I was hired as a country expert for reviewing USAID country 5-year strategy, and after a number of failed attempts to improve elections, strengthening parliament, there wasn't much optimism about the direction of Armenia's political development. An important milestone in the negative development towards autocratization of Armenia, in my opinion, was the adoption of constitutional changes in December 2015, which paved the way for a president who was elected in 2008 to extend his rule beyond the 2 terms by changing the governing system in Armenia. I remember clearly that while drafting the annual report, I was drafting the annual report for Freedom House in 2016, I believe. I noticed that there was another year of stagnation of Armenia and that my country slowly but steadily was coming closer to downgraded to the category of established authoritarian regimes. Despite all the efforts of civil society, international partners, and very few and already marginalized change makers in the government. I should admit there were moments that when I started to doubt that I would ever witness genuine democratic changes or even a single free and fair elections in Armenia during my lifetime. I had the same doubts when I joined the protesters on April 14, 2018 in the Freedom Square, the place that was the epicenter of all important political developments in modern Armenian history, starting from struggle for independence from Soviet Union. There were a couple of thousands of us protesters, and I remember including Danielyan there with his drone documenting the event, a small chat with Arsen talking about the importance of raising our disagreement with the plan of Serge Sargsyan to remain as the leader of country. Indeed, many of us were there just to protest this final act of well-planned process of making Armenia another post-Soviet country that is indefinitely ruled by the single person and single party. Few could predict that only after a couple of weeks, the strongmen would be forced to resign by hundreds of thousands of peaceful protesters who joined those few of us, led by current Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan. Another episode, already by the beginning of July 2018, a commission of experts was formed that was led by Armenia, a small country, so I will keep repeating the same names, led by Danielyani, that was tasked to table a package of changes for the electoral code in preparation of snap parliamentary elections. I was member of that commission, but I joined it slightly lately because I was in this beautiful city early July, supporting the work of Smithsonian Institution because last year Armenia was featured in Folklife Festival. After a couple of months of work, this commission was able to prepare a package of bills, and exactly 1 year ago, October 22nd, 2018, the parliament rejected this bill. And the parliament that still had the majority of the party, outgoing party of previous regime. And interestingly, if they didn't reject the bill, they would be now members, they would now be represented in the parliament because this bill was suggesting for more inclusive rules, electoral rules. December 2018, first ever genuinely democratic elections in Armenia, and as a result of these elections, a new parliament is formed, and I am honored to be member of this parliament. And this assessment is not the assessment of only Armenian public, but also the assessment that is reflected in OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, OSCE ODIHR joint opinion. And starting from March 2018 in the parliament, we formed a working group, bipartisan I should emphasize, a working group where members of all parties represented, tasked with drafting and designing the changes, electoral changes. I should, without taking much of the time, I should just point out two things. This working group has prioritized number of areas for the reform, including changes of political party law. And on Friday, we had a big public hearing with participation of all major stakeholders discussing the ways how we can make, from the one hand, liberalize the rules for party organization in Armenia, from the other hand, for increased transparency, because we consider this as an important measure for anti-corruption. I should conclude with stating that we have no illusions that the task of creating strong and democratic institutions, it is not easy, and there will be a lot of challenges ahead. But there are also no illusions that this is the last, maybe the last chance for our generation to achieve this very important task of building strong democratic statehood in Armenia, which is the only way that Armenia can enable Armenia to meet its challenges within and outside. I want to say that this is a big struggle of a small nation, and this struggle is not about geopolitics. This story is about people who wish to restore their sovereignty and are doing their best to make their homeland a place where they can pursue their happiness and with the respect of human rights and freedoms. And this is the struggle that we all hoped to have the opportunity for during the past decade. I hope later we will have a chance to discuss many more specific directions of the reforms that are happening in Armenia. But I will give the floor now. Thank you.
Mr. Danyeldyan, thank you very much.